Well, how about that? It's time to put on those dancing shoes, everybody, because as you fell in love with Guerschon Yabusele for Team France, well, it appears, based on all the information that we've seen this morning, it's reported that he will now be a member of the Philadelphia 76ers. Welcome to the PHLY Sixers Emergency Podcast with Kyle Newbeck. I'm Devon Givens on this Sunday afternoon. And while we discussed this a little bit earlier in the week, Kyle, I did not expect for us to be linking up, not that I have a problem with it, on a Sunday afternoon to talk about the latest addition to the Philadelphia 76ers, the star from France, Guerschon Yabusele.
Yes, sir. You know, two of us were ready to do our jobs today. No, I'm just kidding about it. Derek is heading on vacation this week, so we decided we'd give him the show off as we check in on a Sunday for another pleasant surprise, I think, this offseason. We've had a few of those so far. You know, I think the first...
Derek says he's here in spirit, by the way.
There we go.
In the chat.
We've had a few what I would call pleasant surprises this offseason already, right? Like, I was skeptical that a Caleb Martin deal could get done, and we were assuming he was going to get more money or have better opportunities elsewhere. They end up getting him. The Paul George thing, that was obviously the biggest pleasant surprise of the whole offseason. But now this is a different version of that, right? We talked last week pretty extensively about, you know, we like the skill set. We like the player. We like where he's at in his career. I think, Devon, we both agree we like the mentality that he has shown coming out of these Olympics, that, you know, he's had all this success overseas in Europe, has honed his game a little bit, and is ready to make the jump to the NBA, wants to come back, wants to prove himself. But we were skeptical that this was the opportunity because of the money that they had to offer, his contract buyout, that Derek got into the nuts and bolts of that during the week. But also, you know, we don't know what his role, what his opportunity is here that they have to sell him on. And yet still they were able to overcome that. They were able to present a compelling enough case to Yabusele to say, hey, look, you come here. We clearly have a need for guys who can, you know, make an impact on the glass. And I think we saw in the Olympics that he's a physical, aggressive rebounder, that's a positive of his at this point in his career. We've seen the shooting during his time in Europe has been consistent, although on low volume. He shot well from three. And they've said, look, we don't have power forwards on the roster, really. That's been something that the fan base, that members of the media, that people have harped on for a lot of the offseason. And so now he represents, even if he's not a guy that we think will be a guaranteed rotation guy, right? And I don't think that he is, certainly coming in as the 14th man on the roster. He brings something different. It's a different skill set. And that, I think, Devon, is what we've all harped on this show pretty often, is just, you know, using these last couple roster spots, what you want to do is just differentiate. If it's a guy that's a elite shooter, you can bring in, you break glass in case of emergency, great. The fact that they were able to get a guy that I think fills a legitimate need, that is this, you know, it's a low risk flyer on a guy that just came off of an amazing Olympics performance. I think this is about as good as you could hope for a 14th guy on the roster. And now I'm interested to see what he's able to show in preseason and training camp, and then how that translates going into the regular season.
And that's where I'll start, because when we talk about this roster being so much improved from where we were a season ago, not saying that it's stacked or anything like that. They just have a lot of versatility. But the one thing that we've discussed, all three of us, the people in the chat, have talked about how there is no power forward. We had a question the other day in the super chat of who's going to be a real power forward. Is there still a possibility of a real power forward out there? May not be a starter, but on the roster. So what you do here and bring in a power forward, if he does find his way onto the roster and maybe into some minutes during the season, he is a guy at that bigger body, that 6'8", 260. I think we had him as when we looked at his profile a little bit earlier when we were discussing this. This is a player that can come in and do a lot of those things and be a front court player that provides something a little bit different. Yes, he can play out on the perimeter, but as you talked about, the physicality that he does provide, that we saw with France in the Olympics, that can now go along with, if he's not on the floor with Joel Embiid, hypothetically, then Andre Drummond is out there. And who is the other power forward on this roster? There is none. Everybody else is a wing. And while we like that, of how they've put this team together, and our starting five includes three wings in that starting unit with Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid, This is a player that comes in that does all of those other things. And when he does come in here and tries to make this roster as the 14th man, as you talked about, he has to come in and do a lot of the dirty work stuff. It's not about the scoring. It's not about any of that. It's about doing everything else. So as people ask about, I saw Lyle on Twitter asking you about the rebounding. Didn't he only have 2 rebounds against Team USA? Well, guess what, my man, if you're going to make this roster, you're going to have to crash the glass. You're going to have to get on the floor and get these little, all the other intangibles that go to winning a basketball game that doesn't provide scoring. You have to do those things to make this roster. If they believe that you can score a little bit, they already know that. It's the other things, because they have enough scoring on this roster where they could use it, certainly in the front court at that power forward position, but certainly with this power forward that you do have, you need the rebounding that goes along with those 2 centers and the lack of size everywhere else to make sure that you secure that basketball and that it doesn't go the other way. The other part is, as you just talked about, whatever they discuss in these conversations, the front office with Yabusele, he clearly heard enough of what he liked to make this the team that he decided to join, finally leaving Spain to come back over to the U.S. and play for an NBA franchise. So whatever it is that they offered, all the things that we discussed with Derek and with the people out there, Kyle, all of the things that we said, this will keep him away from leaving there, and that money that's secure there and coming here and not for a bigger role. Whatever it is, he heard it, he liked it enough to give this the opportunity of a 1-year deal to come to Philadelphia with this group. And I would imagine that it also helps that they are a contending team that could use the services of whatever they discuss that he could provide and make this a nice little fit for at least a training camp invite, the preseason, and see what he has, and possibly going into the start of the regular season if he makes the club.
No, I mean, I would say I think he's going to make the team. It's just a matter of this point of, what does that role, like how big is it? And so here's what I would say. I think if people start looking at the raw numbers and the stats over in Europe, it's always hard to translate, right? So I don't want people to get too locked up in, oh, he had this many assists, he had this many rebounds, he shot this. I think the important thing for Yabusele, and this applies to a lot of the roster as well, I think the versatility is really good, because I think he's got a big body, and the biggest difference to me now versus when he left the NBA is that he is in better shape, straight up, point blank, period. And that was one of the biggest limitations for him early in his career. Like you could see, he can pass on the move at his size. He's a strong guy. He's occasionally can step out and hit a jumper. But back then, because so much of the idea behind drafting him and playing him was, hey, this guy can be a versatile defender. We think he's an intelligent, smart guy who can switch across matchups and do different things. Well, if you're not in good enough shape to constantly, move in space and track guys, that made it a big issue for him. Well, now we certainly saw in the Olympics, and we've seen in recent seasons in Spain, he's moving better, and he's taking care of himself better. He's grown as a professional. He's in the midst of his prime years right now. I believe he's 29 as it stands. And so that has opened up all these other things, right? Like, he shot well in Europe, and the ability to knock down shots at like a high 30s, low 40s type clip year in and year out there has allowed him to take advantage of his ability to put the ball on the deck, beat a closeout, get to the rim, or if he doesn't get to the rim and score himself, he's able to dump it off to somebody else. If you ask him to post up, he's got a big enough frame and a solid enough array of post moves that if he gets a smaller defender on him, he can put that guy through the rim and score around the basket. So you're not going to see him do a lot of these things on a play-to-play basis, right? If he plays 10, 15 minutes a night, more than likely what you'll see him do is spot up in the corner as a shooter. You might see him run some pick and pop. That's something Real Madrid used him for. It's something that, frankly, the Boston Celtics used him for when he was here. But I think the key is he's in the right age bracket. He's got the right versatility for a bench guy. He's got clear strengths that I think he can bring to the table right now. And underneath all of this, it's just a low risk signing. It's a minimum signing. There's basically no downside right now to bringing him in. And I think, as much as we would love another great hometown story, like bringing back Marcus Morris to play forward minutes, I would rather take the gamble, the bet on this type of guy right now. And maybe you get another minimum contract home run, not quite on the level of Kelly Oubre last year, but if you hit like a double on this guy and he ends up looking sort of similar to how he did in the Olympics, that's great. And the bonus, they have another French speaker for Joel in the locker room. So that'll bring Joel a little bit of joy away from the floor as well.
Yes, as Batum goes back to Los Angeles, he can now speak French with Yabusele and discussing all of that stuff. But to your point, one of the things that we talked about earlier in the week when we were going over this, and this was the focus of the start of our show, was him talking about it during the Olympics, or at least being reported during the Olympics, that he's no longer chasing the NBA. He's shown enough over the course of his years in Spain and in the Olympics what type of player he is now versus what he was when he was first with the Boston Celtics. He is not chasing them anymore. They need to come after him. Well, he showed what he can do in the Olympics against Team USA. I think I was looking at Michael Scotto when he had tweeted it out. He said averaging about 19 points in those final 3 games. Before capturing that silver gold medal, 14 overall for the Olympics. So they know that part. He didn't want to chase them. He wanted them to come after him. Okay, cool. But then we also discussed, well, how much does he really want it? Knowing that this, whatever he really wants, a long-term deal, something that's going to be there for him, that may not be there. This is going to be his prime opportunity. You just mentioned it, 29 years of age. He's going to have to come in and find a job now, because I brought up the example of Mike James, the point guard that had Phoenix and Brooklyn. He would come back and forth to the NBA and try to find it until it wasn't there anymore. But he kept exhausting all possibilities until finally deciding, let me go over here and just continue to dominate in this Euro League, win some MVPs and make some really good money over there in his prime, and saying, okay, I'm done. I've done everything that I could to get back to the NBA. But Yabusele just showed me something. And the other part, man, is if this is the case, then he's hungry. If he's hungry and he's coming in on this 1-year deal, he hasn't been here for 5 seasons, and he's hungry to come in here again, not only proving on that stage, but now proving that he does belong in the NBA to stay, not just for a quick cup of tea for a 1-year deal, but after this 1-year deal to secure something long-term to stay a few more years, whether it's a multi-year deal that they say is a 2-year deal with a 3rd year as a team option, whatever that may look like. But he's hungry to come in here and prove. And there's an opportunity, a real opportunity for a guy, again, to come in with a big body front court player, put the ball on the floor, closeouts. He can attack those, put his shoulder into some of those smaller defenders, or even some of those bigger guys. But he has the advantage because he's on the move with that shoulder dipping into their body, and he's crafty enough around the rim to finish with that right hand at the rim, knocking down those outside jumpers that he's improved on, as you mentioned a little bit earlier. There's a lot to like to this game, the extra passing, the unselfishness in the game that could go a long way for this player and for the Philadelphia 76ers. And as we talked about Marcus Morris and Davis Bertans and so many of the names that have been around the league for so many years, taking a swing here after what you have done for all of these other players on this roster is a really good look for this basketball team. And it was something, again, that, we talked about that one a little bit earlier too. Why not take a chance on something else that's a little bit different than the usual suspects that we've seen over the course of these years, and all the names that we've continued to discuss on this show? Because, hey, this guy could be, again, hungry for some real good things here in the NBA, again, trying to come back. And that's exactly what Daryl Morey and the front office have done, and trying to get this done. So real fast, Kyle, wanted to ask you, I know Derek did all the number stuff, but we saw enough of the numbers that were out there a little bit earlier. Woj saying 2.1 million. Shams saying that they could pay up to 890,000, I believe he pointed out.
That was for that's the highest you can pay
for the buyout
for Real Madrid.
Yeah. So right now, just looking at those numbers again on the minimum deal, Woj saying 2.1 that they are going to agree to. Again, not a bad deal for the Sixers to get a player like this at this late stage.
No, and Devon, the other thing, like if you think of this within the full roster, I think you're starting to see like it goes from, hey, they have a bunch of old and maybe smaller guys to look, they have a few in prime or young athletic guys that you can bring in as these jolts of energy and physicality off the bench. You know, we've been big advocates for Ricky Council on this show. They also brought back KJ Martin on that balloon deal. Now you have Yabusele, and you know those guys are going to overlap somewhat, and so that creates some competition for minutes between those guys. And I know we both agree, Devon, on it's always better to have competition and guys having to fight every single day for their role and guys coming in and out so that, you know, iron sharpens iron. They will get the best out of all these guys. It'll keep them all best physical shape, their best practices they can have. Mentally, they'll be locked in. So I think that's a major positive. The other thing, and so we did get a super chat from Mark Jackson asked, you know, does he solve our rebounding issue, the Sixers rebounding issue? I don't know that he or any one person could solve a rebounding issue. What I think he does is, you know, we saw him play a lot of his minutes in the Olympics with Victor Wembanyama, right? And so when you're playing next to Wembanyama, it's pretty, I'd say similar-ish, at least, to playing with Joel. Both guys who can step out and hit a jump shot, both guys who are outstanding rim protectors on the other end. And so if you look at offensive rebounding, if he plays with Joel Embiid, the attention that Joel gets, you know, Yabusele or Kelly Oubre or anybody who'd be coming in from the weak side, they have more opportunities to go and get, you know, free lanes to the ball because of what Joel can draw to him. If he ends up playing, and this will be dependent on his jumper, but if he ends up playing his minutes with an Andre Drummond, for example, Andre's already, you know, he's, if not the best rebounder in the league, he's one of the very elite guys in the league. So if Yabusele is even an okay rebounder next to him, your unit then gets better, right? Because Andre getting any help from the rest of his teammates as a rebounder is basically a bonus. And so really, I think you just get concerned about how does he fit with Joel? Can he space the floor enough to keep the, you know, the spacing open for him? And I think if you go and look, and I'll probably end up writing about this later, if you look at how he played in Madrid, a lot of the time they're running an offense that is spread the floor, guys in the corners, wait for your opportunity. And then if you don't get the shot opportunity in the corner, that's a hard crash down from that corner. We saw PJ Tucker, unfortunately, at 38 years old, trying to do that here. Yabusele's in a much better position physically right now to, you know, play in that sort of role. And so, yes, I think he will help with the rebounding. I don't think he's suddenly going to turn them into, you know, the greatest rebounding team of all time. I just think he's going to be able to chip in a bunch of little ways. And your point about his hunger, Devon, is really important. Like, this isn't a guy who was playing in some no-name league for a no-name team. He's playing for Real Madrid. And if it's not the best overseas league, it's one of them. And he's playing at a pretty high level for that team for 3 or 4 years in a row now. And obviously was playing well enough that they welcomed him back. We're going to have him here for another season in Spain. And so he took the challenge of, you know, he could have gone to a team with lower expectations, a team with maybe a more immediate path to minutes. And he said, no, I want to be on a high profile team, a team where I'm going to have to compete for minutes. I think that speaks well on where he's at as a competitor and as a person, as much as where he's at as a player. And so, look, we're not going to oversell, right? He's the 14th guy on the roster. But I think within the context of everything that they've done this summer, it's another smart, savvy move. And it puts them in a really good position, as good a position as you could hope they'd be in heading into the preseason.
And just to add on to what you said in answering Mark's super chat, it's not about him individually, as you pointed out, everyone. And this goes to the entire roster just because of what we've seen, the lack of rebounding from this team over the last couple of seasons. It's a team effort that they have to rebound much better. The same way it was last year in the playoffs against the New York Knicks. Those guys just wanted it more. So if Yabusele is going to be one of the players that wants it more, we already know Andre Drummond will also, and a couple of those other key free agents that they know their role. Ricky Council, we already talked about what he likes to do when he's out there on the floor and crashing the glass. That's a team thing. That's not just a Yabusele thing. That's everyone giving the effort, the maximum effort of just simply wanting the basketball more than your opponent. So if he can come in and provide that, spark a little bit of a fire of the people that he's on the floor, it's infectious. If you see your teammate doing it and he's out there crashing the glass like that, everyone else is going to say, well, hey, I can't stand here pulling on my shorts just because they're cool. I have to go crash the glass also and help out and get that rebound. So that's all I'll add to what Kyle pointed out.
To that point, I think what we saw in the Olympics at times was not like, hey, this guy is Dennis Rodman as a rebounder. No. I think what we saw is he was willing to sell out and play hard and go after, balls are between somebody's legs. It's just like somebody's got to come up with it. He was able to make a lot of those 50-50 plays. And maybe he can't make those every game or all the time, but
you know what he can do? He can put a body on someone else to create the opportunity for someone else.
Right. What you have to do is just be in position and be of the mentality to try to make those plays. It doesn't mean you'll make all of them. It doesn't mean your team will get all of those. Sometimes they're going to go the other way. The ball won't bounce the way it needs to. But if you put yourself in the position enough times and the thing with the Knicks series, Devon, part of the problem with part of the strength of the Knicks is you never feel like you have your feet under you because they are constantly coming at you from all angles. They're hitting you. They're playing with physicality. So there is never a rebounding opportunity where you can be casual and just kind of stand there. They make you feel uncertain. Well, that's what somebody like a Yabusele, like a Ricky Council, that some of these guys can do coming in off of the bench, offering a spark for this team. And that's all you can ask for out of guys that are going to be deep in the rotation, guys who are not every night players. So I'm very enthused by this signing, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he's got when they open up training camp in late September, early October.
Enthused and very surprised on the Sunday afternoon that the news drops. Guerschon Yabusele talking to the 76ers, serious talks, and then we get some numbers saying that he's agreed to a deal on a 1-year deal.
Just like that happened within the span of probably a half hour. Serious talks, locked in, baby.
Absolutely. Well, we're locked in, and we hope that you are all locked in on the PHLY Sixers podcast. You can never slack off like we try not to. Of course, you don't. We always have to be available for you, just like you are for us on the Sunday. So we hope everybody enjoys the rest of your Sunday. We thank you for kicking it with us to talk about this breaking news. Again, France star Guerschon Yabusele joining the Philadelphia 76ers on a 1-year deal. And we will talk about it more tomorrow at 3 p.m. here on the PHLY Sixers podcast. Derek is on vacation. Bree is on vacation. So much so that we had to do this without Derek. And then Emma, our star, of course, hanging out with us in Vegas. Emma steps in with us today to hang out with us for this emergency podcast. Em, we appreciate you for stepping in and helping out at such short notice, and we really appreciate it. We thank everybody else for joining us as always in the chat. We'll have our roll call tomorrow. So Kyle, shout out to everybody tomorrow. But for us, it will be Kyle and I tomorrow, 3 p.m. on the PHLY Sixers podcast. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Go ahead and talk smack to your Atlantic Division friends, your Boston Celtics friends, and your New York Knicks friends, and Brooklyn and Toronto. Go ahead, have fun, have at it, because it's all fair game in the offseason till the basketball goes up in the air. As Kyle said, training camp, preseason, and then the start of the regular season. Everybody enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Kyle, talk to you tomorrow, man. It's fun as always.
And just remember, on the way out, everybody, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you get notifications when we go live. And if you hit the thumbs up button, we'll be here every day, 5 days a week, as always. We'll catch you then.
Make sure
Thank you so much for coming through.
You check out Kyle's tweets for when he does tweet out the story that he puts together for Guerschon Yabusele joining the Philadelphia 76ers. Make sure you're a diehard member in order to read the story at allphly.com. We'll talk to you tomorrow, folks.
We all silly like the mayor.